Swin Soupsang is with me here, our political correspondent. Just tonight's craziness. Let me start with a very simple question. It comes from Gary on YouTube, one of our viewers watching right now. He says, is this his first step to try and delay the midterms or do something to the midterms? What was the forward-looking part of this? What should we be worried about tonight with this speech?
Well, this is the middle of that campaign. He's been trying a whole bunch of steps. Again, he was throwing spaghetti on the wall, but it was just gibberish and drivel. It was, a tale told by a lame duck president filled with sound and fury, signifying nothing. And we can go and refute each component, which we should. But remember, the whole thing is utter nonsense. And I suppose it was a minor success for the White House in that we were not talking about the Epstein files. We were not talking about the disastrous, illegal, unconstitutional war with Iran, which continues to spiral downward. We're not talking about how difficult it is for people to make ends meet in America. So I suppose they distracted everybody for half an hour or so. But the public anger is rising, and everywhere you go, I've been traveling around the country, Mehdi, to campaign for Democrats and House and Senate races. We're getting huge surging crowds of people demanding that we take our democracy back. You see very few red MAGA hats. Anywhere you go, his support is melting away.
Swin.
Congressman Raskin, you were mentioning about the surging support that you're seeing across the country. Okay, let's say the Democrats do take back the House, maybe even the Senate, but let's just talk about the House right now. So next year, Democrats have power again. The President of the United States, as ridiculous as a lot of this is, it is substantively scary, in my honest assessment. He is perverting, among other departments, the U.S. intelligence apparatus to help him try to rig elections. In plain English, that's what he's doing right now. What do you think your party should do once they have gavel power back to investigate or do something to hold accountability of what they've been doing right now?
We need to continue to expose and counter and reject the reign of authoritarianism and corruption that has overtaken the entire U.S. government. And that means we've got to stop all of the exploitation of the government for money making. They've converted the presidency into a for-profit enterprise. We need to defend the right to vote and the democracy at all costs against all these attacks. And then, look, Tocqueville in Democracy in America said that in our country, voting rights and democracy are either shrinking and shriveling away because he understood the autocratic forces in the country, or they're expanding and growing. And we got to get democracy back on the growth track. And, it's time for us to start electing the President of the United States by popular vote, the way we elect governors and senators and representatives and mayors. The vast majority of the country supports that. One thing I agree with Trump about is statehood, but not for Greenland and Canada and Panama, but for 713,000 disenfranchised people in the nation's capital who are being trampled every day by the policies of this administration. So we got to get democracy moving again. I don't want to be in a defensive crouch about democracy. I want us moving forward.
Sure, but speaking of being on offense, what should Democrats do once they're back in power about what the administration is doing right now?
With respect to this, with respect to the speech tonight, it's almost self-debunking. I mean, there was this national intelligence assessment that was done right after the election, which demolished and refuted the entire purpose of his speech tonight. It said that there was no technical interference, even by Vladimir Putin, who was the real person trying to affect the outcome of the election. But it did not go technical in 2020. It was just massive propaganda and disinformation. And that was on Trump's behalf, not against Trump. Iran, in their third finding, I believe, was found to have tried to do some of the same stuff against Trump, not necessarily in favor of Biden, but just undermining Trump. I suppose Trump got Khamenei back by killing him in this war for whatever he was doing at that point. But the key finding is the first finding, I think maybe you read it, which simply said there was no technical interference with voter registration, with people casting ballots, with the tabulation of the ballots, or the reporting of the results. And they said that definitively, and that echoed the finding of 60 different federal and state court decisions rejecting and repudiating every claim of electoral fraud or corruption by Donald Trump. Let's go back to the big picture. Joe Biden beat him by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. And not even any of these fantastical allegations lays a glove on any of those facts.
There's zero evidence of any vote change. Even tonight, he didn't say, I would have won if X or Y had not been done by
Even
China.
in one state, he didn't say it.
No,
even one electoral college
I'm
vote.
glad you mentioned Russia, because of course he didn't mention Russia conveniently tonight, and yet the documents they posted on the White House website do mention Russia. There's an intelligence document posted on the White House website tonight that says we assess, this is from the 2020 campaign, we assess that Russia is using a range of measures primarily to denigrate former Vice President Biden, which he never mentions, of course, because that doesn't fit the narrative. But even Russia, as you say and as the intelligence says, did not change any votes, and it was a secure election according to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. He did a weird impression, Congressman, I don't know if you know tonight, of Chris Krebs. He did a kind of, they said it was secure, because he's really bothered by Chris Krebs and the CISA saying it was secure. I just want to remind our viewers that Trump has cut the CISA budget. He's cut the FBI task force devoted to looking at foreign interference. So he doesn't actually care about foreign interference. This is about domestic politics. And one other important point he made that Swin and I haven't discussed yet, let me put it to you. He said 250,000 non-citizens are on the voter rolls, that non-citizens are voting. Of course, there's no evidence for this. Even the Heritage Foundation could not find any significant non-voting over 25 years. But is the purpose of that, Congressman, in your view, a justification to get ICE at the polling stations in November? Is it to try and seize more voting information from the states that courts have prevented him from doing? What do you think the goal of the 250,000 claim is?
Well, sure. Everything's on the table. I mean, we saw that in back in 2020, where Trump threw out all kinds of things in order to set the predicate for different kinds of actions, right? So there was the plot to throw in counterfeit electoral college slates. There was mobilizing the mob online, and with the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, other extremist groups that they organized. There was the direct pressure campaign against Vice President Pence. There was Donald Trump just calling up Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia saying, just find me 11,780 votes. So they're trying a whole lot of different things. And they're trying to set the predicate for different kinds of attacks on the electoral system. Imagine if they put 1% of the energy that they've got into this into just following the law and releasing the Epstein files. Right? All they got to do is release them, but they're withholding them, suppressing them. That's Todd Blanche's main job over there, right? Other than getting the $1.8 billion to Proud Boys and Oath Keepers.
It's interesting that he referred to himself again as the most transparent administration. He referred to the Transparency Commission or Task Force that he heaped praise on. He also referred to the Intelligence Advisory Board, which contains people like Katie Miller. So we're really going to take that one seriously. Swin, over to you.
So, Congressman, obviously, in some respects, not everything, their bark is worse than their bite when it comes to their quote-unquote election integrity talk. Like, I don't want to be too much of a doomsayer or someone who freaks people out needlessly about what Trump and his administration can do in terms of trying to rig 2026 or any other elections going forward. Having said that, they are trying on a multitude of fronts to tilt the election towards Trump's party this and other years going forward. What are the scenarios that keep you as an elected representative up at night about what they could actually do this year or other years going forward?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we don't have to imagine and engage in kind of hypothetical extrapolations at this point. They're doing it all over the country. For example, if you go to Texas, they've shut down dozens of polling places around the state. Our people are fighting that every single day, and we've won a bunch of cases. They're trying to throw people off the rolls in certain states because they didn't vote in the last election. I mean, you look at the attack on voting rights in Florida, it's remarkable that the Democratic Party is still standing and fighting back, and we've got a very strong candidate for the U.S. Senate down there in Alex Vindman, and we've got a very strong candidate for governor, a former Republican, David Jolly. But it was a tie election in 2000 at best. And that was with, ex-felon disenfranchisement and hundreds of thousands of people excluded by Catherine Harris because their names resembled those of former prisoners. But in any event, now they say, well, it's a very red state. It's a red state because of voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression tactics that they've systematically engaged in. The Republican Party can't deliver health care to anybody. They can't keep prices down. They're waging war on the working middle class of the country. And the one thing that they do well is try to steal elections by suppressing the vote, gerrymandering the districts, and so on. They spend full time on that. That's all they're doing. So I'm with you. And that means we got to take it seriously. We got to be fighting back every single day.
What are Democrats not doing right now to fight back that if you were leader or speaker or whoever, you would be advocating that they should be doing right now to fight back that they're not?
Well, look, we have teams of hundreds of lawyers around the country who are working on every attempt to strip people of their right to vote, to make it more difficult to register, to throw people off of the rolls. My colleague Joe Morelli, who is the chair, or he'll be the incoming chair, but he's the ranking member on the House Administration Committee, which will oversee any voter contests that take place. He's right now leading the fight for us in there, and we are all on his team helping. But what I would say is we need to build a landslide so large they can't steal it. The Republicans do best when it's a very thin margin, when we just beat them. Like Hillary Clinton beat Trump by 2.5 million votes in 2016, that big victory that he was so proud of. She beat him in the popular election by 2.5 million votes. So we didn't go around and spend the next 4 years trying to undermine the government on that principle, which undoubtedly they would have done. But I will say we need a landslide that is too big for them to rig the election.
Congressman, one thing that was very clear about this is he's obsessed with the Save America Act, which is this voter suppression act that we've talked about at Zeteo before. He talked about getting it passed. He said, pick up your phone. He made it about that at the end, right? This was the kind of build up to what he actually wants. He's so obsessed with this act that when he went on TV to talk about Lindsey Graham's death, all he would talk about was the Save America Act. He said Lindsey Graham's death is a blow to the Save America. That's what a weirdo he is when someone dies. Mark, one of our viewers on Substack, says, what's next after this ineffective call to pass the Save America Act? Are you worried about that passing? Can I just add to that? For people watching at home or people who are on the street who hear about this, who are not partisans, don't follow this stuff closely. I wonder how many of your constituents you come to you and say, yeah, we should pass bills like this because why shouldn't everyone have photo ID when they go to vote? What do you say to them?
I say, first of all, Donald Trump's own election official, who he mocked, as you pointed out in this speech, said that the 2020 election was the safest and most secure election in American history. We don't have a problem with election fraud. When Donald Trump called up Raffensperger and said, just find me 11,780 votes, he wasn't trying to block election fraud. He was trying to commit election fraud. Donald Trump is the one who is trying to steal elections and overthrow elections and incite insurrections in the country and conduct political coups. That's where the problem is coming from. And Democratic and Republican and independent officials across the country agree that our elections have been fair. They're fine and they're transparent. They're open. You can go and find out what's happening there. So again, what should millions of people do? Millions of people should be determined and resolved to vote and should go out and knock on doors like I'm doing this weekend. We're going to Pennsylvania 10 with Janelle Stelson, who is going to beat an insurrectionist in this election, Scott Perry. She came within 1% 2 years ago. And our Democracy Summer Project of high school and college students from the Mid-Atlantic, we're going to be descending on that district, and we got Democracy Summer forces all over the country doing that. If you're a lawyer and you want to get involved with Mark Elias, the ACLU, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, other people fighting to defend the right to vote, or the League of Women Voters, get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with them. But if you're not a lawyer or an election specialist or expert, the best thing you can do is go out and build the landslide all across America.
Before I let you go, Congressman, I'm going to do a quick pivot because another very important issue for our viewers and subscribers, and I know you voted on this week, was the Masih Kana amendment in the House on aid to Israel, on foreign aid, but cutting $3 billion in aid to Israel. I believe you were one of the 100 or so Democrats who voted for that amendment.
Yes.
Even Nancy Pelosi voted for that amendment. What a sea change in the Democratic Party. What do you say to your colleagues who voted no, who want to keep sending aid to a government that is accused at minimum war crimes, at worst genocide? What do you say to almost 100? I think it was pretty split, right? 100 or so each way. What do you say to your colleagues who've carried on voting to send more money to Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think that amongst the Democrats, we had people voting yes, we had people voting no, and we had people voting present. And I think there was a real common denominator in the message, which is we need a dramatic change in the policies that we see coming out of Israel if we're going to pay for it. People do not want to pay for perpetual war and human rights violations in Israel. And we don't want to see continuing cycles of terror like the nightmare that we saw on October 7th, and then the nightmare of the violence unleashed against Gaza. We want to interrupt that. And it became a referendum on Netanyahu's leadership, and nobody could support it. It's led to the tremendous, dangerous isolation of Israel in world opinion, and it's contributed to the kind of chaos that we see spreading throughout the Middle East right now. So I guess at this point we need to stop feeding Netanyahu in that way, and I think we sent a very sharp message about that to Netanyahu. And that's true of people who are lifelong pro-Israel supporters and people who also feel the pain very seriously of the Palestinians, like my colleague Rashida Tlaib, who's a Palestinian American.
You said we sent the right message. Those of you who did vote yes did do that. It is an important message. It is a big change in the Democratic Party for a lot of people. But a lot of your colleagues still, astonishingly, voted to carry on sending weapons to Benjamin Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. One of them is Haley Stevens in Michigan, who's in a very tight Senate race primary. You mentioned going out and knocking on doors. A bunch of your colleagues have endorsed in that race, some for Haley Stevens, like Senator Gary Peters. She's got $28 million in AIPAC support right now, according to today's New York Times. Others of your colleagues, like Ilhan Omar, just came out for Abdul El Sayed, who's also running in that Senate primary, very critical of aid to Israel. Are you going to be endorsing in that race?
I haven't said anything about that race yet, and I haven't had time to closely scrutinize that one. Let me just say, though, back on your other point, which is, in fairness to all of our colleagues, we didn't write that amendment. We don't control the floor. We don't control which amendments get brought up. We don't get to decide precisely on what we're voting for. And I think even for those of us who voted yes, we thought that Masih's amendment was a blunt instrument, and he would not be everybody's favorite introducer of an amendment because he's categorically opposed to foreign aid, which the vast majority of Democrats are not. I don't know if there are any Democrats who take his position on that. We are not isolationists. There are a lot of politics that we don't share with him. So I know a bunch of people didn't vote yes for that reason. But also, the truth is that this was obviously not going to pass, and it's not a great way to conduct foreign policy. But we're in the minority position, so we didn't get to draft what we were voting on. So it was a very blunt instrument, and I think everybody voting was unhappy with the way that the thing was structured. But we clearly need to move forward. And I'll tell you from lots of meetings in the Democratic caucus about this, Mehdi, we are determined to move in a different direction towards peace and social reconstruction for Israelis, Palestinians, everybody in the area. We've got to move to a completely different paradigm. So there's national security and there is peace and human rights for everybody, and we leave the era of terrorism and violence and war behind.
We definitely need a new paradigm. I'm conscious of your time. It's late night. Thank you for taking time out for Zeteo viewers and for our viewers watching on YouTube and Substack. One last related question on this topic.
Of course.
To tie together both things, which is we talk about election interference, election influence. Big money in politics is bad, whether it's from outside of the country when it's illegal or inside of the country when it's coming from super PACs. I think we can agree on that. I assume you're a critic of big money in politics. You've
Yes,
got
indeed.
28 million.
And I hope everybody will support my bill called Get Foreign Money Out, which
But
is all
you've-
about
you've got
rejecting foreign state and corporate money in our politics.
Exactly. And then you've got a group like AIPAC, which says, well, we're not a foreign lobby, we're Americans, spending a lot of money in Democratic races. $28 million, according to today's New York Times, in this Michigan Senate race. A lot of Democrats I've had on the show have said to me, we should stop taking AIPAC money. This is a toxic group. It's funded Republican election deniers, again, to square the circle. Do you agree with that? Do you think Democrats should stop taking money from AIPAC?
Well, I have not taken money from AIPAC to my knowledge. Now, different people mean different things by that. I had people accusing me of taking money from AIPAC because there were J Street people who gave me money. That just struck me as bizarre. So, I certainly know I've never taken money from AIPAC PAC, if that exists.
The super PAC is called the United Democracy Project. They're involving themselves in a lot of primaries, as you know.
Yeah. Look, I've always been a champion for public financing of elections. I'm a complete opponent of Citizens United, which I think is another Supreme Court fraud on the public. A corporation is not a rights-bearing political citizen of the republic. And if you go back and look at what Chief Justice John Marshall said in 1817, he said a corporation is an artificial entity, invisible, intangible, existing only in contemplation of law, possessing only the rights conferred upon it by the state legislature. And so the framers would be absolutely baffled to think that someone saying that this economic entity chartered by the state has the right to essentially go out and buy elections and drown out, the kind of money that citizens, have. The reason Exxon and Mobil have so much money is not because people agree with their politics. It's because people drive their cars to work. And so that's why they've got billions of dollars to reinvest in the kinds of policies that are so dangerous to us. By the way, one thing I did agree with in the president's speech tonight was when he said that America was the hottest country on earth. I don't know if that's strictly true, but with his environmental policies, it certainly feels like it.
Certainly in the DC metro area today where it hit 100 degrees where you and I are. Congressman, thank you so much for taking time out. We appreciate you.
The pleasure is mine. And they say in Washington, it's not the heat, it's the stupidity. And we got plenty of that.
We got plenty of that tonight. Good night, Congressman.